My inebriated brother-in-law ruled our life throughout his brief stay. After I confessed, my husband still liked his brother. We've been married 4 years, Barbara, to Jimmy, 35 years my junior. We met as sophomores when he was a college senior. His kind and loving nature immediately captured me. After 5 years together, we married in a small ceremony with family and friends. Jimmy and I have always been friendly. Jimmy's younger brother, Brent, is 29 years old, and I need to explain their family dynamic so you can understand our recent issues. Jimmy and Brent lost their parents in a car accident at 18 and 12. Both were devastated, but Brent, so young, was most severely hurt. Jimmy, the older brother, raised Brent. He worked 2 or more jobs to pay for his degree, putting his personal goals on hold. Although this event strengthened brotherhood, it also created a problematic relationship in which Jimmy neglects his own wants for Brent's. Now we're married. Brent has struggled with independence and leadership. He worked various jobs in his 20s before finding a permanent employment. Jimmy always helped Brent financially or connected him to people who could open opportunities. I don't understand how many times Jimmy has loaned Brent money and Brent has never repaid the favor. Despite my worries about this pattern, I tried to be supportive. I wanted to be a good sister-in-law because Brent meant so much to Jimmy. I've seen Brent abuse Jimmy's charity for years. Brent's wife Lisa started dating someone else 6 months ago, starting this disaster. After 2 years of marriage, they divorced bitterly. Brent lost his accounting job due to depression, heavy drinking, and frequent absences and mistakes. I initially felt sorry for them. Brent was clearly struggling with the divorce. I regularly had supper with Jimmy, listened to him cry about Lisa, and encouraged him to get therapy, whether treatment or support groups. Brent had done little to improve his situation after months. One late night last month, Brent arrived at our doorway drunk and distressed. After telling us he was in over his head, he begged to remain with us until he could pay his rent again. Jimmy said yes without looking at me. Despite my indignation and bewilderment at Jimmy's decision-making, I kept quiet. I tried to talk to Jimmy later that night, while Brent was asleep on our couch too. Set regulations and a schedule for his stay. Jimmy rejected my concerns, saying our presence was vital during Brent's predicament. Brent has been staying with us for over a month, and I grudgingly let him stay because I assumed it would just be a few weeks. Brent doesn't even look for work. He never leaves bed till lunchtime, creates a mess everywhere, eats our meals without help, and spends most of his time on TV or video games. As a remote graphic designer, Brent's constant presence is hindering my productivity. Home. Despite never applying for a job, he utilizes my office while I'm not there, claims he needs the space to find work, and is noisy and interruptive. When I tell Brent to clean up or get job, he always makes excuses or promises. When I mention it, my brother Jimmy defends him by saying we must be patient, because Brent is going through a terrible time. We appear to be allowing Brent to be reckless and lazy right now. It bottomed out last week. Because I had a vital video call with a client, I respectfully asked Brent to leave the office for a few hours and not make any noise. His consent was universal. He raced into my office midway through my call, rifling through my desk drawers and stating he needed a pen. He seemed drunk. I abruptly ended my call out of humiliation. When challenged about his actions, Brent grew defensive and accused me of being overly sensitive and insensitive. Since his behavior was unacceptable, I lost my tolerance and told him to find a home, as expected. Brent left the house and called Jimmy to complain about my cruelty. Jimmy attacked me for being cruel and ignoring my family at their most vulnerable moments when we returned home that night. He said I lack empathy, because I'm an only child and don't know what it's like to have siblings. This caused a tremendous fight. I outlined how Brent has used and interfered with our lives in every way. Jimmy reminded me of all the holidays his family had welcomed me while my parents were unhappy. My relationship with them is always tense. He said he never moaned during last year's week with my college friends. I believe Jimmy was missing the mark in town. Staying for a week is very different from inviting someone to stay permanently. I told Jimmy I can't live like this, yet I love him. Brent's constant presence has made our home less like ours. As said, Brent had to leave by month's end. Jimmy's wrath escalated with this ultimatum. He claimed expelling Brent would make me, permanently damaging their relationship and trying to divide him from his sibling. Leaving quickly, he didn't return until late that night. He hasn't spoken to me since, save to reiterate his refusal to expel Brent. This drives me mad. I feel conflicted because Brent is struggling, and I think we've supported him enough, and he's exploiting our charity. I like to avoid my brothers, but I don't want to be the victim at home. Would you label me sexist if I wanted to fire my brother-in-law? In this situation, what should I do? First update, thanks for the feedback, your encouragement and new perspectives. Gratefully received. It's given me much to think about. Your feedback inspired me to try again to reason with Jimmy. After Brent left for the day, I waited until we were off work. I made Jimmy's favorite breakfast and suggested a park picnic to reminisce about our first date. I softly complained about Brent's bothersomeness at the park. How has his behavior affected my employment and family? I provided examples. I sympathize with Brent, but I don't think. I stated that letting him freeload forever isn't helpful. I expressed my greatest anguish from Jimmy's dismissal of my concerns and his claim that I don't understand sibling relationships. Despite my troubled family past, I wanted him to know how supportive I was of his relationship with Brent over the years. Jimmy's focus startled me. His conflicted feelings surfaced as we spoke. He admitted that he knows Brent is manipulating the situation, but he can't shake his guilt and duty. He said Brent always brings up his parents' loss and Jimmy's promise to care for him. Efforts to discuss employment or leaving. Jimmy cried hysterically as he shared his dread of losing Brent, his only blood relative. He fears Brent will grow drunker or act insane if pressed too hard. Jimmy revealed that Brent's vague comments about not continuing worried him. The news shocked me. I had no idea Brent exploited Jimmy's emotions. I felt new empathy for the brother's suffering. Jimmy and I decided after a long, emotional conversation that we must solve Brent's problem, other than having him reside with us forever. I think Brent should have 2 more months to find work and a home alone. In the meanwhile, we'll set stringent rules. Brent handles groceries and utilities. Everyone must help around the house. He must show that he seeks work daily. Nobody will drink at home anymore. He should avoid my workplace during work hours. Jimmy agreed to talk to Brent honestly given these goals and the 2-month deadline. He acknowledged that his brother needs professional help, which we cannot provide, and promised to research Brent's addiction treatment and therapy. My reaction to our conversation was cautious. Sense of optimism. Jimmy and I shared opinions for the first time in weeks, and I hoped we could work together to resolve the issue. The next day, something unusual occurred. I worked in my office while Brent was on the phone in the living room. He was ranting at someone, possibly a friend, about Jimmy and I being cruel for evicting him. Among his many insults, he said I incited Jimmy to betray him. The worst part was his, "I know how to handle Jimmy" comment. I'll mention his parents and possibly threaten to do something stupid to get him to reconsider. Again, he does. I was furious. My empathy from yesterday vanished instantly. My indignation at what I heard drove me out of my office to confront Brent. After discovering I had overheard him, he became angry and tried to recant his statement, stating I misunderstood. A disagreement ensued. Brent said I was eavesdropping and mediating between his brother and himself. I snapped and called him a manipulative, spoilt brat who should grow up and stop micromanaging others' problems. I told him about his emotional blackmail of Jimmy. It had to end now. Brent's anger flared. He angrily declared I was trying to kidnap his brother and would show Jimmy what a horrible jerk I was. He stated that I could never understand what he and Jimmy went through. He stormed out after slamming the door. Anger and adrenaline made me shake. Jim was unresponsive when I called him at work. He should come home right away so we can talk, I texted him. When Jimmy arrived home a few hours later, I was still mad and Brent was gone. I assumed Jimmy would share my anger at Brent's deception when I told him. Unexpectedly, Jimmy sided with Brent, disappointing me. He told me I was stupid to confront Brent, that I must have misheard him, and that he probably didn't mean those words. I allegedly stoked Brent's wrath. Another significant fight followed. After our talk the day before, I couldn't believe Jimmy supported Brent. Jimmy went looking for Brent, claiming he was worried about his brother's mental health. Jimmy hasn't returned home since yesterday. He ignores my calls and texts. I have no idea where he and Brent are or what will happen. This drives me mad. Whatever I do, I'm the villain. I sometimes wish I could escape this terrible situation. I prefer not to leave my place or let Brent separate Jimmy and me. I have no idea what to do now. Please share your disaster management ideas. Second, the situation has worsened in the 7 days since I last wrote. After Jimmy left to find Brent, they stayed at a hotel for 2 nights. Jimmy said they were going home on day 3 and we needed to discuss. I anticipated what I thought. Debate would be difficult. It surprised me how thin and distraught the brothers looked when they arrived. They talked incessantly about Brent's issues, their relationship, and their parents' deaths during those days. After Jimmy confronted Brent about his deception, an ultimatum was presented. The 3 of us sat in our living room, feeling doomed. First, Jimmy apologized for neglecting my concerns and leaving suddenly. He admitted to denying Brent's issues and their impact on our marriage. Brent then spoke hesitantly. Having admitted, he apologized for abusing our generosity. He acknowledged to using emotional manipulation to avoid dealing with his depression and alcoholism since his divorce. The discussion was lengthy, impassioned, and often heated. We discussed limits, expectations, and change. Consensus was reached. Brent would move to a smaller flat in 2 weeks with Jimmy's help. He chose outpatient alcoholism treatment. He wanted to start therapy to combat his depression and codependency. Jimmy and I would go to couples therapy to improve communication and trust. Brent was asked to limit family dinners to once a week. I was wary and distrustful, but cautiously optimistic about this suggestion. I knew it would take time for my relationship with Jimmy to recover from the storm, so I was ready. While helping Brent find After moving into an apartment and packing, the next 2 weeks were hectic. Things got heated, especially when Brent complained he felt booted out, but Jimmy stuck to our strategy. Brent moved into his new apartment a week ago. His recovery program is underway, and he seems committed. Jimmy and I found our first couples therapy session difficult but rewarding. We are improving our communication and addressing the root causes. Still, I have trouble trusting others and managing rage. Jimmy's dedication is coming into question to our bond, and worry he'll prioritize Brent over our marriage. It's hard, but I'm trying to be patient and let him prove himself. A few alarming events have occurred. Brent has called Jimmy late at night, feigning a crisis twice. Jimmy rushed to Brent's flat twice, leaving me feeling abandoned and anxious. Jimmy fought back when I expressed my concerns, saying he can't ignore his brother's issues. Despite my sensitivity for helping loved ones, I think it's necessary to set limits. Jimmy may not be able to handle Brent's relapse. Former manipulation approaches. More optimistically, I've begun reclaiming my identity and sovereignty. Despite the chaos of the last several months, I've been reconnecting with friends and taking an online graphic design school to improve. To reclaim some of my life and focus on myself after all this family discord is good. Jimmy and I are considering a weekend retreat to reconnect. Leave Brent alone for a weekend worries me, but I hope it's a good thing. Nice move. I balance supporting Jimmy's sibling interactions with maintaining a strong marriage and meeting my own needs every day. I constantly question my actions and struggle to maintain equilibrium. I would welcome any advice on how to handle this complex family dynamic while protecting my marriage. I want this to work, but if it doesn't, I'll be hurt again. Third update. My last post was a month ago, and I'll update you. The latest in our endless family drama. Brent had moved into his apartment 5 weeks earlier. Good changes have been made, but the transition has been rough. Jimmy says he hasn't drunk in 3 weeks and has attended treatment regularly. He also sees a therapist twice a week for depression and codependency. Jimmy and I have kept our couple's treatment commitment. I learnt a lot, but it wasn't easy. Beyond Brent, we found relational issues. Jimmy tends to sometimes disregard my feelings and opinions. His need to protect and fix derives from his upbringing by Brent and his parents' deaths. I struggle to articulate my wants because of my worry about being vulnerable, which derives from my problematic family relationship. Our ability to communicate and understand one another is improving. It's early, but I think we're on the right track. Our planned weekend retreat was great but hectic. Enjoying one another. We spent great times reuniting without the tension of the past 3 months. Brent repeatedly called Jimmy while we were traveling, suggesting he could fix a minor issue. Jimmy tried to set limitations, but I could tell he was emotional every time his phone rang. Fortunately, I focused on my career and self-improvement. The online course I'm taking has led to some intriguing new project prospects. My new interest of volunteering at an animal shelter has made me happy and relaxed. We are maintaining weekly family dinners. Though improving, things are still tight. Brent has started asking about my career and attempting to have more positive conversations, which is a big improvement. Still, problems arise. Brent was fired last week from a local grocery after working part-time. He blamed his employer's indifference during recovery. Jimmy realized Brent had a history of shift tardiness afterward. Therefore, Jimmy and I argued again over how much support to provide Brent, despite my efforts. To be patient, I sometimes get resentful. Preoccupied with avoiding problems and watching Brent's next move, I wonder if this is our path. Jimmy and I talked about our future last night. Together, we want to build our marriage. However, Brent's issues may last. We're trying to balance family support and boundaries. New rules have been established. Jimmy won't rush to Brent's place in distress. He will try to get Brent to use the coping methods as being treated for. To improve our relationship, we won't discuss Brent on date evenings. Jimmy makes biased decisions, so I'll participate more in Brent helping conversations. I am cautiously optimistic about these gains, but we still have a long way to go. Despite loving Jimmy and wanting to help him, I must prioritize my own needs and care for myself. My future objective is to enjoy life fully. By day. Not every day is perfect. I'm learning to enjoy the little wins, like when Brent and I can have a pleasant conversation at family dinner, or Jimmy and I can resolve our differences without arguing about his brother. I have no idea what awaits us. However, I will continue to strengthen our marriage. I'm trying to focus on my career and interests to escape this family drama. I'm forever grateful for everyone's support. Your advice is invaluable. If our situation changes significantly, I will notify you.